The year was 1968. Apollo 8 would circle the moon. People were listening to the sounds of Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, the Rolling Stones, Cream, the Motown sound, Peter, Paul, and Mary. It was an election year. There were riots, curfews. The country was in turmoil. The Vietnam War appeared to be over, but on January 31st, the Tet Offensive erupted, and it became apparent that the war was well from over. March 16th, Senator Robert F. Kennedy announced his candidacy for President of the United States. March 31st, President Lyndon B. Johnson declared that he would not seek re-election. April 4th, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis. And at the end of April, the Poor People's Campaign came to Washington, D.C. It was called Resurrection City. The California primary was scheduled for June. Senator Robert F. Kennedy did not think he was going to win, but he wanted to bring to light some of the issues the country was facing at the time. But later that evening, the evening of June 4th, he realized that he was going to win. His headquarters was at the Ambassador Hotel. Just before midnight, Kennedy headed down to the ballroom to celebrate his victory with his supporters. He said to the crowd, "I want to express my gratitude to my dog Freckles. I'm not doing this in any order of importance, but I also want to thank my wife Ethel." He finished his speech by saying, "So my thanks to all of you. Now it's on to Chicago and let's win there." After his speech, he would talk to the press, and on this occasion, the shortest route would take him through the pantry. 17-year-old busboy Juan Romero, a Mexican immigrant, wanted to greet the senator again. He met him the previous day when he bribed one of his co-workers to let him take room service to the senator. When he met him, he said that the senator shook his hand with both hands and that he had a way of making him feel as if he really mattered. He was there in the pantry to greet him again. And when the senator approached him, he shook his hand, and as soon as he let go, he heard gunshots. Pandemonium broke out in the pantry. People weren't quite sure what was going on. Some people saw Robert F. Kennedy put both of his hands up to his head. Juan Romero said that he saw him stagger and collapse to the floor. He went to check on him. There was a slight neck wound, but it was not life-threatening. But a bullet did enter the senator's head, just behind his right ear, thrusting skull fragments and bullet particles into his brain. Juan Romero said, "I kneeled down to him and I could see his lips moving. So I put my ear next to his lips and I heard him say, 'Is everybody okay?' I said, 'Yes, everybody's okay.' I put my hand between the cold concrete in his head just to make him comfortable. I could feel a steady stream of blood coming through my fingers. I remember I had a rosary in my shirt pocket, and I took it out, thinking that he would need it a lot more than me. I wrapped it around his right hand, and then they wheeled him away." Romero did not talk about his recollection until 50 years later. Ethel Kennedy said, "Oh my God," and she tried to push Romero away. At one point, he asked his wife, "How bad was it?" And when it was time to move him, he said, "Please, please don't let them lift me." And then he went into a coma, from which he would never regain consciousness. People outside of the ballroom were cheering, "We want Kennedy, we want Kennedy." The crowd began to find out that Senator Kennedy had been shot. He was taken a mile away to Central Receiving Hospital, and 30 minutes later, he was transferred to the Good Samaritan Hospital. He underwent surgery at about 2:24 a.m. and it did not conclude until 7 a.m. People who went to sleep that night saw that Robert F. Kennedy had won the California primary. only to awake the next morning to see front page newspapers reading that he had been shot. Some of the country was still mourning the loss of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Rick Hampson of USA Today later wrote in 2018, "What madness is afoot," as Bob Considine, Hearst newspaper's star columnist. "We're sick. The assassin has 200 million heads. One is yours, one is mine." Historian Arthur Schlesinger Jr., a Kennedy advisor, was pessimistic. "We are a violent people with a violent history, and the instinct for violence has seeped into our national life." Robert F. Kennedy survived the next 26 hours. At 1:44 a.m., June 6, 1968, Robert Francis Kennedy died in California. They flew his body back from Los Angeles to New York, where they held a funeral service for him on June 8th at the St. Patrick's Cathedral. Saturday, a train brought his body from New York to Washington, D.C. Because so many people were out on the tracks to pay homage to him, the train had to be slowed down. Hundreds of thousands of people stood alongside the train route, holding up signs saying, "We love you, Bobby." When he arrived at Union Station in Washington, D.C., the funeral processional left en route to Arlington National Cemetery. But on the way, it went by Resurrection City, which was next to the Lincoln Memorial. The marchers who were living in Resurrection City, who came from around the country, the people who Kennedy vowed to stand up for, paid their final respects as his body was taken across Memorial Bridge. 1968 was a tumultuous year, and yet 50 years later, we are still facing some of the same challenges in our country. This is John W. McCaskill, History Alive. Check out our website at www.jwmhistoryalive.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you want more films, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at John W. McCaskill. This is John W. McCaskill, History Alive.